In the beginning was the Word. But what does that actually mean for your life today? Join me as we go deep into the Gospel of John, verse by verse. I'm Matthew Harvey. This is Unlock the Word. A father is standing in front of Jesus, and his son is dying 20 miles away. He's made the journey from Capernaum to Cana, which is a full day's walk. Maybe even more, because he has heard that this man can heal, and he is out of options. Every other door has been tried. Every other remedy has failed. And now he's standing in front of a Galilean teacher, pleading while his son lies in a bed many miles away, getting worse by the hour. And Jesus does not go with him. He does not pack a bag. He does not rush to the bedside the way you would expect compassion to move, the way every instinct in this desperate father is hoping he will move. He simply says a sentence, a word, and tells the father to go home. Go, your son will live. And the father believes the word and starts walking. Not because he saw anything, not because he had proof, because of what was said to him. Now, this is the second sign John records in his gospel, and it is the quietest one yet. No water becoming wine in front of witnesses at a wedding feast, no whip, no overturned tables, no public theological debate. Just a word spoken at a distance, and a father who has to decide in real time, with his son's life on the line, whether that word is enough to walk 20 miles home on. The truth is, most of us at some point in our lives find ourselves in exactly this position, asking God to come down, to show up visibly, to fix what is broken in a way that we can see with our own eyes. And sometimes, instead, we receive a word. This episode is about what it costs and what it produces to believe a word before you have any other evidence at all. But beneath this simple family drama runs a massive theological current that the church has always recognized. It's a current that connects the dusty roads of Galilee to the very beginning of Genesis. What does it mean that the Word who spoke creation into being is the very same Word standing in front of this Father, still speaking, still creating life out of what was dying? Well, welcome back to Unlock the Word, a Real Talk Deep Devotion podcast. I'm Matthew Harvey, and this is episode 8 as we are moving through the book of John. Today we're in chapter 4, focusing in on verses 43 through 54, the healing of the official son, the second sign of this gospel, and the close of the major literary section the Apostle John began back at the wedding in Cana. Now, to understand this moment and why it matters so much, we have to look at the ground we've traveled. The truth is, we've come a long way since the prologue. The eternal Logos became sarx, flesh, and pitched his tent among us, full of charis and aletheia, grace and truth. We've watched the calling of the first disciples, Andrew, Peter, being renamed before he had earned it, Nathanael known under his fig tree. We watched the wine at Cana, where the best was kept until now. We watched the clearing of the temple, where Jesus claimed his Father's oikos as his own. We've sat with Nicodemus through the conversation about being born know then, from above, by pneuma, the wind and spirit.
We've watched it as John the Baptist modeled joyful decrease, rejoicing fully as the bridegroom's voice grew louder than his own. And just last episode, we walked through one of the richest passages in the entire gospel, Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well, offering her living water that wells up to eternal life, and declaring that true worship has nothing to do with the right mountain or the right temple address, but everything to do with spirit and truth. Today, John returns us quite deliberately to the very town where this whole cycle began, Cana of Galilee. This isn't a random healing story dropped into the narrative. It is a carefully placed bookend. And as we return to this geography, we're going to slow down and ask a question the early church fathers asked constantly of this text. The question is this: what does it mean that a spoken word carries life-giving power strong enough to reach across 20 miles and reverse a dying body? But to answer that, we will eventually travel into the mind of St. Athanasius and the deep Eastern monastic tradition of watchful, attentive prayer known as nepsis. But first, we have to stand with Jesus in the hill country as the crowds begin to gather. So join me as we start reading John chapter 4, starting in verse 43. After 2 days, he had departed for Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too had gone to the feast. So he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better. And they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." The father knew that that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." And he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. All right, there's a lot to unpack there, so let's jump right in with verses 43 through 46. After the 2 days, he departed for Galilee. Parenthetically inserted, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast. Right, so notice how John goes out of his way to highlight the return to Cana. It's because he's building a structural frame around this story, this literary journey we've been going on over the last few chapters, wanting us to feel the symmetry. The first sign happened in this town, and we're about to see the second sign unfolds here too. But look at the tension that John drops into the narrative with that strange parenthetical statement. A prophet has no honor in his own hometown. Nazareth, where Jesus was from, rejected him, but Galilee is welcoming him. The question is, why do they welcome him? And it's because they saw what he did in Jerusalem. Their welcome isn't based on this deep understanding of who he is, It's based on the excitement over his growing reputation. And the truth is, there's a quiet, sobering warning here that familiarity is not the same thing as recognition. Sometimes people who think they know us best are the ones who are the most blind to what God is doing in our lives. And it is this superficial, miracle-hungry environment that honestly sets the stage for the physical journey that defines the rest of the story. You see, Cana sits up in Galilean hill country. Capernaum, where the boy is dying, sits on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. That's the descent of roughly about 15 to 20 miles through what would be rugged, demanding terrain. So this is not a short errand. The official chooses to believe Jesus. If he chooses to believe this word, it won't be instant gratification. He'll have to walk for hours in silence, alone with his thoughts, with nothing more than a remembered sentence to keep him going. And into this high-stakes geography that our desperate Father arrives with Jesus standing with a crowd of people, right? This is where we pick up in the next verse. It says, "And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death." So let's talk about this royal official. Now the word that's used here is basilikos. This was someone in the direct service of the king. So in this context, it would be King Herod. This man had social standing, immense wealth, and definitely had political clout. So he had access to the finest first century physicians money could buy. Yet none of that mattered. His status had brought him to the edge of his son's grave. And in the blunt Greek that John uses here, his son is about to die. The truth is that desperation is a great leveler. A royal official of his status would normally send a servant to handle menial tasks. But instead, he makes the grueling 20-mile climb himself. Love for his dying child dissolves his pride, dragging him up the mountain to beg a penniless, wandering prophet for a miracle. That's where we pick up in this next verse, right? So he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Jesus responds here saying to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." Now, on first reading, the response of Jesus sounds honestly incredibly harsh. This is a father who's pleading for his dying child, and Jesus responds with what looks like a cold theological rebuke. But the grammar of the Greek text here unlocks his true intent, because the word here in the Greek is plural. It's more like you all. So unless you all see signs and wonders, you all will not believe. Jesus isn't just speaking to this one broken father. He's addressing the surrounding Galilean crowd. He's addressing a widespread, shallow faith that demands a spectacle. A faith that treats him like a magician rather than the Lord of life. But this official doesn't care about these theological debates. He, in fact, doesn't even defend his faith or argue any points. He simply cuts through the noise with his raw, unvarnished desperation, saying, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Well, this is the hinge of the entire account. The Father wants a physical presence. He wants Jesus to travel with him to Capernaum and perform a visible, hands-on healing. He wants to see the miracle happen. But Jesus is about to bypass his sight entirely and invite him into a deeper kind of trust. Here's what Jesus says to him. Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. notice this dramatic shift. Jesus refuses to go. He does not lay hands on the boy, nor does he offer a dramatic prayer, long distance blessing. He simply utters a short command. Go, your son will live. In the Greek, it's Rhēu hue as soze. Go, your son lives. And John tells us that the man epistou sen, he believed. This is the same active personal trust or belief that we saw back in Cana with the wine miracle. But notice the immediate transition in the text. He didn't believe because of a visible sign. He believed, right, based on the word that he was told. Quite literally, the word that Jesus spoke to him. But to understand the depth of what's happening here, we have to look at the specific word that John uses to describe the word. The word that he uses here is Rhēma, right? We've been familiar with the term logos, which refers to the cosmic eternal word, like in the prologue. But Rhēma refers to a specific spoken utterance, a particular word spoken in a particular moment to a particular person. And John is showing us how abstract theology becomes intimate reality. The Father isn't asked in this moment to grasp the entire cosmic identity of the Logos. He's asked to cling to a specific, highly personal word. Your son will live. Imagine the weight of that walk home, 20 miles of descending trail. With every mile that passed, the initial surge of hope would have wrestled with creeping doubt. What if I got this wrong? What if my son died while I was walking away? Why didn't I insist that he come with me? This walk that the Father makes is actually the perfect picture of the Christian life. You see, because faith isn't just the moment of decision, it's a sustained posture. It's the grueling discipline of keeping your feet moving in the direction of the promise, with nothing but a remembered Rhēma to sustain you when there's no physical evidence in sight. And we pick up here in verses 50 through 54. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better. And they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. The father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son will live. And he himself believed, and all his household. So the breakthrough happens on the road. The servants come meet him with the news, and the father immediately asks for a specific timestamp, right? So the servants let him know, hey, the 7th hour, which would have been about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the climax of the story's inner logic, right? The healing didn't begin when the father arrived home and saw it. It began the exact microsecond the Rhēma was spoken over 20 miles away. And this reveals something magnificent about Christ's authority, his life-giving power, his Zoe. It's entirely unbound by physical distance. Space is no barrier to the spoken word of God. And look at the ripple effect of this, right? This long, quiet walk of faith. John writes that the Father believed, and all his household, his oikos. Because one father had the courage to walk 20 miles on nothing but a spoken promise, his entire extended family, his servants and dependents are all brought into the life of the kingdom. And then John concludes this by marking this as the second sign, sealing the Cana framework. At the wedding, Jesus showed his power over substance. Here he shows his power over space and sickness. Together, these signs reveal that the king has arrived to reclaim and restore his creation. Now, to fully appreciate the depth of this second sign, I think we need to look at the early church and how they parsed this event. Historically, modern readers often view the church fathers as detached, dry academics. But this is a profound misunderstanding. The Patristic Fathers, the pastors, theologians, and bishops of the early church, were deeply pastoral, viewing this miracle not as a mere historical anecdote, but as a window into the mystery of salvation. The creator and the healer, right? During the early centuries of the church, there were Gnostic teachers who attempted to sever the Old Testament from the New Testament, claiming that the creator God of Genesis was a harsh, material deity, while Jesus represented a completely different spiritual father. But the Patristic Fathers, people like Irenaeus and Athanasius, rejected this. In fact, writing in the 2nd century, pointed directly to healings like this one to prove the absolute continuity of the two testaments. Irenaeus argued that the very same hands of God that molded Adam from the dust of the earth are the hands at work in the healing of the official son. He says, when Jesus heals, he is not a new deity stepping in to fix a broken alien world. He is the original artist returning to his own gallery, restoring his own masterpiece. The voice that said, "Let there be light" in the darkness of Genesis is the exact same voice saying, "Your son will live," to the darkness of death in Capernaum. Saint Athanasius, the words creative sovereignty, this brings us directly to him, right? He had a treatise in the 4th century titled On the Incarnation. His core argument here is beautifully simple. Only the Creator can recreate. If humanity is falling into non-existence of death because of sin, only the one who brought us out of non-existence in the first place can reverse the decay. He wrote this, "For the renewal of creation has been the work of the self-same word that made it at the beginning." Taking those two questions in this light, the 20-mile gap between Cana and Capernaum is highly theological. By healing that boy with a mere spoken Rhēma over a vast distance, Jesus demonstrates that his physical body does not contain or limit his divine power. He is simultaneously present in the room with the Father in Cana and present at the bedside of the boy in Capernaum, holding both of them in existence. This is the Logos exercising his cosmic creative sovereignty over time and space. But how does this cosmic power intersect with our daily internal struggles? Well, in the Eastern spiritual tradition, it preserved its writings and it offers a practical tool, the practice of nepsis, or watchfulness. You see, nepsis is a spiritual discipline of sober alertness, the practice of guarding the heart and mind against intrusive, anxious, or destructive thoughts, which the tradition actually calls logos moi. You see, the official's long walk home is actually a master class in nepsis. On that 20-mile descent, his mind would have been bombarded with fearful thoughts, right? What if you were too late? What if you trusted a fraud? Had the father succumbed to these thoughts, he would have turned back to beg for a more visible sign. Instead, he practiced holy watchfulness. He guarded his heart, repeatedly shutting out the voices of panic by anchoring his attention solely on the single life-giving Rhēma he had been given. Your son will live. Through nepsis, the walk home becomes the crucible where his soul is quieted, prepared to receive the miracle that has already taken place. But this is also where theosis, the deep process of transformative union with the divine nature, comes into focus. If a spoken word can reach across 20 miles and instantly reverse physical death, then the ongoing communion this whole gospel is building toward is not a metaphor stretched thin. It is the same kind of divine power operating now at the level of the whole person, drawing us into the very life of God. All right, let's bring this home. A father of immense status and resources ran out of options, walked a day's journey and begged for physical presence. Come down before my child dies. Instead, he received a Rhēma, a single sentence spoken across 20 miles of open air. And he chose to turn around and walk home on the strength of that word alone. Most of us find ourselves begging God for a come down moment. We want the visible proof, the emotional surge, the undeniable confirmation before we are willing to take that next step. And yet, in this mysterious economy of grace, God so often hands us a Rhēma instead. A promise from Scripture, a quiet, steady conviction in prayer, a word that requires us to trust Him in the dark. The actual faith doesn't happen when the word is spoken, nor does it happen when the news finally arrives. The faith happens in the 20 miles in between. It happens on the long, quiet road of obedience where you have nothing to hold on to but the promise. That is the second sign. It's quiet, undramatic, and deeply domestic, but it reveals a staggering reality. The Word, the Logos, who spoke the universe into existence, is the same Word who speaks directly into your specific desperate situation today. And His Word is still more than enough to walk 20 miles on. As you carry this teaching with you this week, I want you to consider 3 questions. What is the come down that you are currently demanding from God? What visible proof are you waiting for before you will trust Him? And is it possible He's already given you a Rhēma that you're overlooking? That's number 1. Number 2, where are you in your own 20 miles right now? Have you stepped out in obedience to a promise, but find yourself walking in the silence of the not yet? What does nepsis, or guarding your heart against the anxious thoughts, look like for you today? Finally, third thought, who is watching your walk? Just like the official's oikos, who in your life is quietly observing how you carry your faith through silent miles, and how might your steady trust invite them into belief? I want to thank you for joining me today for this episode of Unlock the Word. If this episode met you where you are, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's currently walking home in the dark on nothing but a word. Don't forget to leave a review on Spotify or on YouTube. It genuinely helps others find their way to this table. New episodes of Unlock the Word drop every single week. And our next episode, we're heading to Jerusalem to a pool called Bethsaida, where a man has been paralyzed for 38 years. Jesus is going to ask him a question, that will pierce right to the heart of his identity and ours. Until then, stay in the Word, stay in the love.